Picture this. It's a freezing February morning in 1953, somewhere in the rolling farmlands of Wisconsin. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, painting the snow-covered fields in shades of pink and gold. A farmer walks into his barn, coffee mug steaming in his hand, ready to start another day of work. But what he finds stops him cold. 3 of his best dairy cows are lying on their sides, legs stiff, eyes wide open, unable to move. They're not dead, but they're not really alive either. They're somewhere in between, and he has absolutely no idea why. Now, if you think that's bad, imagine this happening on farm after farm, county after county, state after state, across the American heartland, from the lakes of Minnesota down through the cornfields of Iowa, and into the dairy lands of Wisconsin and Illinois. Thousands of cattle were mysteriously collapsing and dying. Healthy animals one day, paralyzed the next, gone within a week. And nobody, not the local vets, not the agricultural colleges, not the experts with all their fancy degrees, nobody could figure out what was killing them. This was rural America in the 1950s, folks. A time when a handshake still meant something, when neighbors helped neighbors bring in the harvest, when the local diner was where you got your news before the evening paper arrived. These were communities built on the land, families who'd worked the same soil for 3, 4, sometimes 5 generations, and now they were watching their livelihoods die right in front of them, one cow at a time. You've got to understand what losing cattle meant back then. This wasn't some big corporate operation with insurance policies and backup plans. We're talking about family farms where every single animal mattered. A good dairy cow in 1953. That was like having a reliable truck and a steady paycheck all rolled into one. Lose one cow, and Christmas might be a little tighter that year. Lose 3 or 4, you might be looking at losing the farm your grandfather homesteaded. The timing couldn't have been worse either. World War II had ended just 8 years earlier. American agriculture had gone through this massive transformation during the war, ramping up production to feed Allied troops overseas, adopting new technologies, new methods, new everything. When the soldiers came home, that drive for efficiency didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. American farming was modernizing at breakneck speed, and everyone was excited about it. One of the biggest changes sweeping across the Midwest was how farmers stored their hay. Now I know what you're thinking. Hay storage doesn't sound very exciting. But stick with me here, because this is where everything starts to go wrong in the most unexpected way. For hundreds of years, farmers had done it the same way their great-grandfathers did. Cut the hay in summer, let it dry in the sun, stack it in the barn. Simple, reliable, but not perfect. If it rained during harvest, you could lose everything. Dried hay lost a lot of its nutritional punch compared to fresh grass, and the whole operation depended on having good weather at exactly the right time. But then came this modern innovation called silage. Instead of drying the hay, farmers were now cutting it while it was still green and juicy, chopping it up and packing it into these tall cylindrical towers called silos. You've seen them, those iconic structures that still dot the American countryside, standing tall next to the red barns. They became symbols of progress, of the new American agriculture. Inside those silos, something almost magical happened. The green plant material would ferment, kind of like how cabbage turns into sauerkraut. This fermentation preserved the feed and kept it nutritious all winter long. Cattle loved it. They produced more milk, gained weight faster, seemed healthier overall. It was like someone had figured out how to bottle summer and feed it to cows in January. Farmers were excited. This was the future. Bigger yields, healthier animals, less dependence on the weather. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turned out, a whole lot. But here's the thing, the problem was invisible. You couldn't see it, couldn't smell it, couldn't taste it. It was lurking in the silage itself, growing quietly in the dark, moist environment inside those silos. When conditions weren't quite right, when the moisture level was off by just a bit, when the chopping wasn't done properly, when temperatures fluctuated in certain ways, specific types of mold would start growing. And these weren't your ordinary molds. These were nasty ones producing something called mycotoxins. The worst of these toxins was a compound called decumarole. Here's what decumarole does, and it's genuinely terrifying. It stops blood from clotting, just completely shuts down the body's ability to form blood clots. Now we need blood clots to survive. Every tiny cut, every little internal bump or bruise, our blood needs to clot to stop the bleeding. Without that ability, even the smallest injury becomes life-threatening. So these cattle were eating contaminated silage every day, and with every meal they were essentially being poisoned. The decumarol was building up in their systems, slowly destroying their blood's ability to clot. They'd be fine for days, maybe weeks. Then suddenly some tiny internal injury would start bleeding and it wouldn't stop. The animal would collapse, paralyzed by internal hemorrhaging, and there wasn't a thing anyone could do about it. The symptoms were heartbreaking to witness. Strong, healthy cattle would suddenly become weak, unable to stand. Some would bleed from the nose or mouth. Others just lay there, legs rigid, slowly dying from bleeding you couldn't even see. And it was happening everywhere, all at once. Veterinarians were completely baffled. These were experienced professionals who'd seen just about everything that could go wrong with livestock. But this was different. The cattle had all the signs of poisoning. But from what? They tested the water. Nothing. Checked for toxic plants in the pastures? Nothing. Examined the grain. All clean. Every test came back normal, and yet the cattle kept dying. Letters started pouring into the agricultural colleges. Desperate farmers writing to professors at the University of Wisconsin, the University of Minnesota, Iowa State. Please, can you help us? We're losing everything. The pressure on these institutions was enormous. These weren't just research questions. These were people's lives being destroyed. Meanwhile, out on the farms, people were getting desperate. When the experts don't have answers and your livelihood is dying in front of you, what do? You start trying anything and everything. Farmers changed water sources, moved cattle to different pastures, switched feeds, tried every old remedy they'd ever heard of. Most attempts failed, but they kept trying because what choice did they have? And then something strange started happening. Word began spreading through the farming communities, quietly at first, almost whispered over coffee at the local diner or after church on Sunday. Some farmers were reporting success with something that sounded absolutely crazy. They were feeding their sick cattle moldy hay. Not just any moldy hay, but specifically sweet clover that had gotten wet and developed this white, dusty mold on it. Now think about how insane that sounds. Your cattle are sick, possibly dying from some kind of contamination, and the solution is to feed them more moldy stuff. It goes against every instinct, everything you've been taught about keeping animals healthy. You might as well suggest treating a bullet wound with another bullet. But here's the thing about farming communities. Information travels. When something works, even if it sounds ridiculous, word gets around. Did you hear about the Johnson place? Their cattle were on death's door and they tried that moldy hay thing. The cows are back on their feet. No kidding. Same thing happened over at the Anderson farm. My cousin 2 counties over says it worked for them too. The veterinarians and agricultural scientists were skeptical, naturally. This sounded like folklore, superstition, the kind of old wives' tales that modern scientific agriculture was supposed to replace. But the reports kept coming in, and more importantly, the farmers trying this bizarre remedy were seeing results that the scientific community couldn't provide. Here's what makes this even more interesting. This folk remedy wasn't pulled out of thin air. It had roots going back to the old world, to agricultural practices brought to America by European immigrants. Farmers from Scandinavia, from Germany, from other parts of Europe, they'd brought with them centuries of accumulated knowledge about treating livestock. Some of that knowledge involved using specific types of moldy or fermented materials in very particular ways for certain conditions. They didn't understand the science behind it. How could they? The biochemistry wouldn't be worked out for decades, but they'd observed results over generations. Animals sick in this particular way? Try this particular remedy. It's the same kind of empirical knowledge that gave us aspirin from willow bark and digitalis from foxglove long before anyone understood why they worked. So while the scientists were in their laboratories trying to figure this out systematically, farmers were out in their barns conducting their own experiments, guided by desperation and folk wisdom passed down through immigrant communities. Now, let's jump to the scientific side of this story, because that's where things get really fascinating. Back in 1933, 20 years before our 1953 crisis, A farmer had brought a dead cow and a can of spoiled sweet clover hay to the University of Wisconsin. He demanded to know why his cattle were dying. A biochemist named Carl Paul Link took on the challenge. Link spent 7 years working on this problem. 7 years, can you imagine the dedication? He and his team at the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation were determined to figure out what in that spoiled hay was killing cattle. In 1940, they finally isolated it, decumarol. They'd found the culprit. But understanding what causes a problem and knowing how to fix it in the middle of a crisis are two different things. When the massive outbreak hit in the early 1950s, Link's earlier research suddenly became critically important. The scientific community now knew what they were dealing with, even if they didn't yet have a perfect solution. Here's where it all comes together. The decumarol was depleting vitamin K in the cattle. Vitamin K is essential for blood clotting. Without it, blood can't form clots properly. The moldy sweet clover that some farmers were using as a folk remedy? It contained compounds that could help restore vitamin K function, though not in any consistent or reliable way. The remedy worked through pure luck and the complexity of biochemistry that nobody fully understood yet. But once researchers understood the mechanism, that this was a vitamin K problem, they could develop real solutions. Vitamin K supplements became available. Feed testing protocols were established so farmers could check their silage for contamination before feeding it. Agricultural extension agents fanned out across the Midwest, teaching farmers proper silage management, correct moisture levels, proper chopping techniques, adequate compaction, careful monitoring. By the mid-1950s, the crisis was over. What had seemed like an unsolvable plague just a few years earlier was now a managed, preventable condition. The folk remedy with moldy hay was obsolete, replaced by scientifically formulated vitamin K supplements and evidence-based prevention methods. But here's where this story takes an unexpected turn that changes everything. While Carl Paul Link and his team were studying decumarol and how it prevented blood clotting, they realized something profound. This could be useful for humans too. Blood clots kill people. Strokes, heart attacks, pulmonary embolisms. These are often caused by blood clots forming in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the 1950s, doctors had almost no tools to prevent dangerous clot formation. Link's team started wondering, could they modify decumarol to create a medication that would help prevent these deadly clots in people? They could, and they did. The result was warfarin, named after the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation. Warfarin became one of the most prescribed medications in human history. Millions of people have taken warfarin to prevent strokes and heart attacks over the past 70 years. It's still widely used today, though newer alternatives are becoming more common. Think about that journey for a second. Contaminated cattle feed in Wisconsin leads to dying livestock. Desperate farmers try a folk remedy involving moldy hay. Scientists investigate why the remedy sometimes works. That investigation leads to understanding blood clotting mechanisms. That understanding produces a medication that saves millions of human lives. You couldn't make up a more perfectly interconnected story if you tried. From barns in Wisconsin to hospitals around the world. From dying cows to saved human lives. From folk wisdom to cutting-edge medicine. Oh, and there's one more twist. Warfarin also became one of the most effective rat poisons ever developed. Same compound, same mechanism, prevents blood clotting, but used for completely different purposes. Life-saving medication and pest control, both from the same source. The 1950s cattle crisis left lasting marks on American agriculture. Those tall silos became more than just storage structures. They became reminders that innovation comes with risks, that new methods need careful management, that problems can lurk in places you'd never expect. If you drive through the Midwest today, you'll still see some of those old silos standing. Many are abandoned now, slowly weathering away. Some have been converted into homes or art spaces. A few are still in use, carefully managed with all the knowledge gained from that difficult period. They're monuments to a particular moment in American agricultural history, symbols of both progress and caution. The crisis also validated something that rural Americans had always known in their bones: the importance of community. When official channels couldn't provide answers fast enough, farmers helped each other. They shared observations, tried different approaches, and spread word about what worked. The solution, both the folk remedy and the eventual scientific treatment, emerged from this combination of individual experimentation and collective knowledge sharing. This wasn't just people being stubborn or anti-science. This was practical people dealing with an immediate crisis in the most effective way they could. And when scientists did develop better solutions, farmers adopted them readily. There was never a conflict between tradition and progress. Both were tools in the same toolbox, used as the situation demanded. The land-grant universities and the agricultural extension system proved their worth during this crisis. These institutions, created by federal legislation decades earlier, were specifically designed to bridge the gap between academic research and practical farming. Extension agents lived in the communities they served. They understood both the science and the reality of farm life. They could translate between farmers and researchers, ensuring information flowed both directions. That infrastructure still exists today, though it's evolved to address modern challenges. Extension agents now deal with precision agriculture, sustainable farming practices, climate change adaptation, organic certification. But the core mission remains: connecting research to practice, ensuring scientific knowledge improves real-world farming. There's something deeply American about this whole story. The independent farmers facing crisis, the communities pulling together, the immigrant knowledge preserved across generations, the academic researchers working with practical farmers, the unexpected breakthrough benefiting people far beyond the original context. It captures something essential about how America has approached problems throughout its history. The 1950s were a pivotal time for American agriculture. Small family farms were beginning their long decline, even as total agricultural production soared. The romantic image of the American family farm was giving way to larger, more mechanized operations. The cattle crisis happened right in the middle of this transition, affecting both traditional operations and modern commercial farms. Looking back now, from our vantage point 7 decades later, the crisis seems almost quaint. We have sophisticated feed testing, reliable vitamin K supplements, proven silage management techniques. The problem is solved, relegated to agricultural history books and the memories of older farmers who lived through it or heard stories from their parents. But the lessons remain vital. Agriculture continues evolving, adopting new technologies constantly. GPS-guided tractors, drone crop monitoring, genetic modifications, artificial intelligence in livestock management. Each innovation promises benefits, but also carries risks we might not fully understand until problems emerge. The 1950s experience reminds us to embrace progress while maintaining humility about what we don't know. To value both scientific research and practical observation. To build strong information-sharing networks. To take folk wisdom seriously, even when it seems to contradict modern understanding, because it might contain truth we haven't discovered yet. It also reminds us that solutions come from unexpected places. When experts are stumped, breakthroughs can emerge from farmer experimentation, from traditional knowledge, from connections nobody anticipated. Staying open to unconventional ideas while rigorously testing them, that's how we make progress on difficult problems. For the American Midwest, this crisis became part of regional identity. It reinforced values these communities already held: self-reliance, mutual aid, respect for both tradition and innovation, skepticism of easy answers, trust in proven results over fancy theories. These agricultural communities were forged through experiences like this, coming together to solve problems, adapting to survive, emerging stronger and wiser. The bizarre home remedy, feeding moldy sweet clover to dying cattle, worked for reasons the farmers themselves couldn't explain. It was an imperfect solution, inconsistent and unpredictable. But for a crucial period when nothing else was available, it saved farms and bought time until science could provide better answers. And from that desperate improvisation came understanding that revolutionized medicine. From farmers fighting to save their cattle came research that has saved millions of human lives. From crisis came breakthrough. From the heartland of America came innovation that changed the world. That's the real story here. Not just about cattle disease or medical discovery, but about how communities respond to crisis, how knowledge emerges from multiple sources, how solving one problem can unexpectedly solve others, and how the connections between different fields of human endeavor are far more intertwined than we usually realize. The next time you pass through farm country and see those old silos standing against the sky, remember there are stories behind them. Stories of challenges faced and overcome, stories of desperate measures and unexpected successes, stories of people who refused to give up, who kept trying until they found what worked, who helped each other survive difficult times. The cattle bleeding crisis of 1953 is largely forgotten now, known mainly to agricultural historians and those with personal connections to that era. But it deserves to be remembered, not just as a veterinary curiosity or a footnote in medical history, but as the example of human resilience, ingenuity, and the unexpected ways that solving practical problems can lead to breakthroughs that benefit all of humanity. From dying cattle in Wisconsin barns to life-saving medication in hospitals worldwide, from folk remedy to scientific breakthrough, from crisis to opportunity. That's the American story, isn't it? Finding ways forward when the path isn't clear, combining old wisdom with new knowledge, and never giving up even when the situation seems hopeless. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found this journey through forgotten agricultural history as fascinating as I did researching it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the remarkable stories hidden in America's past. Share this with anyone who loves farming history, medical breakthroughs, or just appreciates how interconnected our world really is. This video is inspired by real historical events based on documented agricultural crises of the 1950s, the actual research by Carl Paul Link at the University of Wisconsin, and the verified development of warfarin from cattle disease research. It is not intended to represent or offend any individuals or communities. Until next time, keep exploring the amazing connections between agriculture, science, and the American experience.